Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to this press briefing. My name is Maria-Agnes Heine, and I'm the head of the Communication Department of the European Medicines Agency, EMA. In response to requests from some journalists over past weeks, we are starting with today's press briefing to update you regularly on the state of play regarding our activities linked to the agency's response to COVID-19. We are piloting these regular press briefings and are therefore very interested in your feedback also, as we want to make these as useful for you as possible. So let's get started today with this technical briefing. I'm delighted to have three colleagues here with me. It is Dr. Marco Cavaleri, who is the head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Fergus Sweeney, the head of the Clinical Studies and Manufacturing Task Force, and Dr. Georgi Genov, the head of pharmacovigilance. So how we will run this technical briefing. Please note that your microphone is disabled by default for the duration of the briefing. Initially, Dr. Cavaleri is going to update you on recent developments in the area of the development and evaluation of COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. Then we will have about half an hour for questions and answers. Today's briefing is being broadcast by Europe by satellite and also via YouTube. The footage can be used for free by all media. You will find the respective links in the invitation that we sent to you. I'm now handing over to EMA's Head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Marco Cavaleri. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Thank you very much, Maria-Agnes, and thanks to all of you for taking the time for this briefing today. I will start by giving you a brief outline of where we stand with respect to activities related to COVID-19 at the EMA. So let's start with vaccines. So what have we achieved so far? We have 4 safe and effective vaccines that have been authorized so far in the European Union. As you know, 2 are based on the messenger RNA technology, so the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Moderna one, and 2 are based on adenoviral platform, which are the Astrazeneca vaccine and the Janssen one. All these 4 vaccines have been formally authorized, and we are the only agency that so far has achieved such goal of having 4 vaccines authorized for preventing COVID-19. While this may sound impressive, it's still not enough, and it's still a long way in terms of other activities that we will be conducting with respect to development of vaccines, and we hope that in the future there will be many more that can be authorized in the European Union. To start with, as you know, we got 4 vaccines that are undergoing rolling review as we speak. These are the vaccines from Curevac, which is a messenger RNA vaccine, the Novavax vaccine, which is an adjuvanted subunit vaccine, the so-called Sputnik vaccine, which is an adenoviral vector vaccine using 2 different vectors, and the Sinovac vaccine, which is a whole virion inactivated vaccine. All these 4 vaccines are undergoing assessment as we speak, and data are dropping in constantly so that we can come up very rapidly with a decision on whether this vaccine can be approved in the near future. Behind this, we are also evaluating data from clinical trials in adolescents with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine called Comirnaty, and this is with the intention of extending the indication for use also in this population. And we are aiming to accelerate this procedure so that we can come up with an opinion by the end of this month, considering that in any case the submission of the data occurred only at the beginning of May and actually last week. In parallel, we are also working in order to expand the manufacturing capacity and to help manufacturers to bring up more supply of all these vaccines that are terribly needed, not only in the European Union, but also in other parts of the world. And in this sense, we are trying to expedite procedures that could allow the approval of other manufacturing sites. Very importantly, our role is to continuously monitor the performance of these vaccines in the post-authorization phase. And in this sense, we also recently have updated recommendations in order to ensure the safe use of these vaccines. In particular, as you know, these rare blood clots that have been occurring after administration of the Astrazeneca and Janssen vaccine have been identified, and we are following up closely on these adverse events in order to better understand what is the mechanism behind that and who is affected. Besides this, as you know, we also conducted a review of the risk after AstraZeneca vaccine in order to contextualize such risk, considering the benefit that this vaccine is providing in preventing COVID-19, in particular in terms of morbidity and mortality. And this exercise has been conducted looking into particularly age group and taking into account of the rate of transmission that could be diverse over time, and it's very important to take that into consideration. Also, with respect to vaccine, we are proactively talking to manufacturers in order to make sure that we are well prepared in case there is a need to update the vaccine composition in case variants are emerging that would escape immunity from the vaccines. Now, it does not seem to be really the case at this point in time, but we have to be prepared, and that's why it's so important that we bring up this work as swiftly as possible so that we can update the vaccines in the future as needed. But let's move to therapeutics. Not much has been said about therapeutics, but again, this is a very important area as we see still a lot of patients suffering from COVID-19, being hospitalizing and dying of COVID-19. So far, we have approved one antiviral drug, which is remdesivir, and we gave a scientific opinion for dexamethasone that, as you know, is a drug that has been convincingly showing to reduce the mortality due to COVID-19 in a large randomized controlled trial. Besides this, we gave also free scientific opinion to support the use of monoclonal antibodies with antiviral activity before they are actually authorized, so that they could be used very rapidly in the context of reducing the burden of disease associated with COVID-19. And a total of 4 monoclonal antibodies are undergoing rolling review right now, and we really hope to conclude this process as soon as possible. On top of this, another drug, which is an immunomodulator called baricitinib, has started a procedure for extending the indication of use so that it could possibly be used in the context of treatment of COVID-19. Despite all these efforts, more has to be done, and there is still a need of effective treatments for patients in need, and that's why we are tenaciously working with developers in order to make sure that we can bring forward quite swiftly new therapeutics that could help patients and save lives at the end of the day. In this sense, we have been reflecting that since the beginning of this pandemic, we have been engaging with 250 products, either vaccines or therapeutics so far, and also we have been given formal scientific advice, which is our tool for engaging on research or development for 80 medicinal products, 30 vaccines and 50 therapeutics. But we see that there is more to be done, and we are ready to continue down this path. As we know, still this pandemic is over, but having effective treatment and vaccine is the only way to put an end to this and return to normal life. So I will stop here so that there is sufficient time for any question you may have.
Many thanks, Dr. Cavaleri. So we are now opening up the floor for questions. And if you want to ask a question, please click on the emoticon icon at the bottom of the WebEx window to raise your hand. And when I give you the floor, please unmute yourself and turn on the camera. You can then ask your question. The first question is from Maria Caru, Radio Nacional de España. Maria, please.
Hello, thank you. I have 2 questions. First of all, I would like to know if you have some evidences or some conclusions about the vaccine's efficacy for the Indian variant. And the second one, there are some countries like Spain that are still waiting, that have not yet decided what to do with the AstraZeneca second dose, whether to give it or not to the people who have received the first one. What do you recommend to those countries? To use the AstraZeneca to the second dose, to use another vaccines, or even to use only one dose? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria. And Dr. Cavaleri.
Yeah, indeed. With respect to the Indian variant, we have been monitoring very closely the data that are emerging. I have to say that in terms of cross-neutralization of antibodies that are elicited from the vaccines that are in use right now in the European Union, the data seems to be rather reassuring on the fact that at least the messenger RNA vaccine will be able to neutralize this variant, at least to an extent that will guarantee sufficient protection. Now, we also expect that the viral vector vaccine will also be effective, and we are looking forward to gather more evidence from real-world data in India, where a version of the Astrazeneca vaccine is in use, in order to have a good understanding to what extent this vaccine is protected there as well. But so far, overall, we are pretty confident that the vaccines generally will be covering this variant. With respect to the second dose, indeed, we still have limited evidence, at least from the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine after 2 doses, but so far there is no indication that giving a second dose will increase the risk of these rare adverse events related to unusual blood clots. And therefore, it's still recommended that a second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine should be used. At the same time, we see that some member states are thinking about giving another vaccine a second dose. And as you know, there is a clinical trial ongoing in the United Kingdom that will give us important information with respect to the possibility of going down in this direction if it's preferred to do so.
Many thanks. We now take a question from Helen Collis from Politico. Helen, please.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first question is regarding information that's come out of Brazil in the last day. Brazil has suspended using the AstraZeneca vaccine after a pregnant lady died shortly after being vaccinated, and it's suspected that she died due to the vaccine, and she died from a stroke. Do we have any information on what the side effect profile is looking like with related to blood clots in pregnant women in the EU? And can you comment on the Brazilian position, please? And then secondly is around a question on Sputnik. I understand the EMA's inspectors have visited the facilities in Russia and carried out good clinical practice inspections, and GMP inspections are now what are remaining. Can you explain to me the difference between what is required in the GCP inspections and what is remaining in the GMP inspections? Thank you.
Thanks, Helen, for what is, I think, effectively 3 questions. But I'm giving the first one on Brazil and the adverse event in pregnant women to Dr. Georgi Genov.
Thank you. We do indeed have very limited data with regards to safety in pregnant women, as very few pregnant women were exposed in clinical trials. We are closely monitoring in the post-authorization phase. Obviously, at this stage of the vaccination campaign, similarly, very few pregnant women were vaccinated, so we don't have any data to indicate any concern. In the overall discussion on these rare thrombotic events, thrombocytopenia combined with thrombosis, which we call now TTS, thrombosis thrombocytopenia syndrome, we have not been able to identify any patients at higher risk, and similarly that would apply, at least on the database, on the data we have currently, to pregnant women, but we'll be closely monitoring. Thank you.
There was a question regarding that Brazilian case. Do we already have any information, Dr. Genov?
Not that I can comment on, but certainly something we'll be looking at.
Thank you very much. And now on the question regarding the Sputnik inspections, Dr. Fergus Sweeney, please.
So thank you very much and good afternoon. Indeed, the good clinical practice inspections of the Sputnik clinical trials in Russia have recently completed, and EU inspectors are just commencing the good manufacturing practice inspections. The results of both of these sets of inspections are then integrated into the assessment process as it goes on, so their outcome will form part of our further decision making on the product. You asked also about what is the difference between a GCP and a GMP inspection. So a GCP, which is good clinical practice, is a scientific and ethical standard for the conduct of clinical trials. It's an international standard, and the inspectors will have been visiting the clinics and locations where the trial has been carried out in order to ensure that the ethical standards have been complied with and that the data reported in the clinical study reports can be verified, and talking to people involved to make sure the protocols were followed, and the outcome of that is reported in their report. GMP is good manufacturing practice, and that's inspection of the manufacturing sites, the factories where the vaccine is being produced, and these are to ensure that all of the proper standards and controls that govern the careful process of manufacturing and ensuring the consistency of manufacture of the product, its compliance with the various testing requirements and outcomes have all been complied with. And again, the outcome of this will feed back into our assessment. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Sweeney. The next question comes from Patrizia Antonini from Italian news agency ANSA. Patrizia.
Thank you very much. I have a question on Pfizer-BioNTech. The Italian Technical and Scientific Committee, CTS, has recommended to delay Pfizer-BioNTech's second doses to 5 to 40 days. So I would like to know what is EMA assessment on this, and because Pfizer recommends 21 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, indeed, the recommendation included in the project information talks about a 3 weeks interval, because this is what has been studied in the pivotal clinical trials that led to the approval of this vaccine. However, it is important to remark here that in the clinical trial, the second dose was allowed to be given up to a window of 42 days, which means that in few instances, indeed, the second dose was given much later than 3 weeks, and of course within the allowed interval of 42 days. These information are reported in the product information, and from this perspective we could consider that given the second dose with an interval that is prolonged up to 42 days, then would not be a deviation from the recommendation and would not be considered as a use of the vaccine that would be off-label. Of course, if the proposal would have been to go longer than 42 days, then on the contrary would have been a deviation, but keeping to that interval, that it should not be a major problem.
Thank you very much. We are now taking a question from Maria Psara from the Greek newspaper EFSIN. Maria, please.
Thank you for the floor. If you can hear me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. I would like to ask about the immunity, if we have something more specific now to say about the immunity from the vaccines, and if the third dose of vaccine will be needed. And the second question on therapeutics. If I'm not wrong, the Commission has put a target for having 3 medicines till October and 2 more till December. Do you find this goal too ambitious, or it is possible? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, with regard to your first question, indeed, we do not know yet when it will be the right time for giving a third dose. And that's why we are monitoring carefully how the antibodies are decaying over time. But also importantly, we need to look into real-world evidence to have a good understanding of when we start seeing some reduction in protection over time. Only this type of evidence will give us the data that we need in order to have a good understanding of when will be the right time to give a third dose, which could be, a traditional booster, so with the homologous strain included, or whether we should consider in the long run the introduction of a vaccine that includes one of the variant strains. So it's very premature to say that, and I think we have to be careful not to jump to conclusion with respect to the timing of when a booster should be given. With respect to your second question about the therapeutics, the Commission strategy may look ambitious, but this is pretty much in line with our expectation and based on the products that we have right now under evaluation. So we do believe that this goal can be achieved, and we really hope to confirm this to you in the near future.
Thank you very much. We now have a last question on our list here, and this comes from another Greek colleague, Yannis Palaiologos from Comirnaty. Yannis, please.
Hi, yes, thank you very much for the question. The two short ones, actually. One is about Curevac. Our previous information was that there would be a decision on Curevac late May, beginning of June. I wonder if you can confirm that we're still on that timeline. And secondly, maybe this is premature, but if there were to be a second dose from someone who's done a first dose of AstraZeneca with another vaccine, would it still be the case that it would have to be at least 8 weeks after the first dose? Thanks.
Both questions for Dr. Cavaleri.
Yeah, with respect to Curevac, the timetable is not yet fixed, and the main driver is going to be the result from the pivotal clinical trials that is currently ongoing. So once this will be achieved and we will get the result from this study, it will be possible for us to define with the manufacturer what could be the precise timetable for a potential conditional marketing authorization. So this might be imminent, and we really hope to see good results emerging in the near future, but that's all we can say as per today. With respect to your second question, the interval between an heterologous boosting after AstraZeneca, this is currently unknown, and that's why it's so important that we gather evidence like the UK study that I mentioned to you earlier, which indeed is looking into giving a second dose of a messenger RNA vaccine after a first dose of AstraZeneca with an interval of 4 or 12 weeks, and vice versa, giving first a messenger RNA vaccine followed by the AstraZeneca. So this data will be extremely important because it will tell us what could be the best strategy in case it is preferred to go down this approach of going with an heterologous boosting.
Thank you. And we have a few additional questions. The first one comes from Virginie Bagouet from APM. Virginie, please.
Hello. Hello, I would like to know when do you plan to finish, if you already know, when do you plan to finish evaluation of the 4 vaccine, Novavax, Sputnik, Curevac and Sinovac? And my second question is related to rare thrombosis reported after AstraZeneca administration. Can you give us an update of the cases of rare thrombosis reported after AstraZeneca vaccination in Europe?
Thank you very much. The first question is for Dr. Cavaleri.
Yeah, as just said, for Curevac, indeed, is a bit premature to define exactly the timetable, but indeed, if the results from the clinical trials are being gathered very rapidly, we could be rather fast with Curevac. Novavax, we will be discussing, as also mentioned in a recent press release from the company, what could be done in terms of manufacturing of the vaccine, and might well be that then this will be rediscussed around July to see exactly by what time frame it can be approved. For Sputnik, as already mentioned, GMP and GCP inspections have been taking place or are taking place as we speak, and we are also gathering more information that are filling in all the gaps in the dossier, so we should be able in the coming weeks to better define what could be the timetable for a potential approval also of the Sputnik vaccine. For Sinovac, we just started the rolling review process, so right now we are in the midst of defining by when the key elements of the dossier can be delivered to us, so that we can then know more precisely by when this vaccine could be approved.
Thank you very much. For the question on TTS, Dr. Genov, please.
Okay, thank you. A helpful question. Will allow me to elaborate a little bit more beyond giving you the numbers. So in terms of those very rare side effects that we have identified and evaluated promptly, both for AstraZeneca but also for Janssen vaccine. I can reassure you this is an ongoing evaluation. The numbers that we've shared previously should be seen into the context of the exposure. So with the increasing exposure of patients with increasing vaccinations, we will see additional numbers of these rare events. You asked for AstraZeneca. In terms of updated numbers, we'll communicate those in the next contextualization exercise. So I'll refrain from giving you numbers now. For Janssen vaccine, I can reassure us as of yesterday, we haven't seen any cases in Europe of those rare and unusual clotting events with thrombocytopenia. I think the other thing that I would like to highlight is that so the numbers we provide come from Eurovisions. This is our database where we collect suspected adverse reactions reported by patients and healthcare professionals. And this data is publicly available. So on our adrreports.eu website, you could find information on all those events for vaccines, but also all the other medicines, and also very importantly, helpful explanation how to read those numbers, what to consider in terms of caveats, potential duplicates, as those reports could come from a number of different reporters, and although we continuously monitor and clean the data to avoid those duplicates, those could exist. And also, another point I'll make, importantly, these reports in Eurovigilance, the numbers do not mean necessarily that the vaccine or a medicine has caused those events. I think these are two important points to consider, and I think I'll finish with reassuring you that we continuously monitor also risks such as these rare thrombotic events with AstraZeneca, even after those are identified, characterized, to gain further information in terms of mechanism, in terms of any potential patients and risk or risk groups. And we will update you, of course, as new information arises. There's nothing that I can report today that is different than the previous communications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Naomi Kreske from Bloomberg. Naomi, please. Naomi, do you hear us? Unfortunately, we can't hear you. So let's go to the next journalist. I'll take a question from Daniel Kemp. Danny, please.
Hello. Yeah, Danny Kemp from AFP, Agence France Presse. A couple of things, if I may. The first one is that we have a fact-checking service which targets a lot of disinformation about vaccines. An awful lot of this disinformation involves the manipulation or taking out of context of figures provided by the EMA. I was wondering if you have any plan in hand to tackle this, which would seem to be a serious problem, whether you're doing that with the European Commission or with others. Also just wondered if you're seeing any particular places where that's coming from, for example, Russia or China. And just one other thing, could we have an interview with EMA Cook, please? Because you've given one to the 4 European papers. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Danny. Regarding the interview, that needs to be requested, and we always need to see how it fits within our executive director's calendar. But we are definitely going to look into that. Your first question is going to be responded to by Dr. Sweeney.
So thank you, Daniel. The really important question, because it's very important for the public to have good reference information, authoritative information available to them so they can make their judgments and considerations about vaccines and the use of vaccines. Vaccine hesitancy is clearly something we need to overcome by providing confidence to the public. And an important part of that, and to counter sources of disinformation, is the transparency that the EMA exercises through the publication of information on our assessment procedures and on the outcome of those, where we're publishing, of course, the the opinions, the European Public Assessment reports, risk management programs, and also the clinical study reports for these vaccines, and continuously monitoring concerns and questions from the public. We've had a number of public events where patients and consumers are invited to pose questions, as well as other people, healthcare professionals. Through that, we can provide authoritative information, but it's very important that people also understand that they should come to authoritative reference sources such as the EMA websites and those of the national competent authorities for information, and not looking on social media or other sources which may not be at all reliable, because their disinformation is spread. So really look to the authoritative sources of information from the medicines agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now can read the question of Naomi from Bloomberg, as her audio did not work. So she is asking, what kind of data and clinical trials will you want to see in order to approve a booster vaccine that's tailored to variants, and how quickly could that process move? Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, I guess this will be a combination of data from the laboratory in terms of ability of the antibodies elicited by the vaccine to cross-neutralize the new variants, but also importantly, we need to have data that we show in the field. So in terms of either real-world evidence or clinical trials, what is the level of protection that is retained by the vaccines that we currently have against the variants? And only a combination of these two would allow us to define in a timely manner whether indeed it would be warranted to amend the composition of the vaccine. But also importantly, we need to look into the epidemiology overall. So what are the strains that are circulating in Europe and in other parts of the world, so that we can make sure that whatever vaccine will be out and deployed will be able to cover for all the different strains that will be in circulation. Say this, we already defined our requirements in terms of clinical trials and in terms of manufacturing that would allow a very rapid approval of this variant vaccine should the need arise. And we are already talking to the manufacturers to try to have a common understanding of how these studies should be conducted, what will be the deliverable, so that in case there is a need, we are already prepared, and in a matter of few weeks or a couple of months, we are able to approve these variant vaccines.
Thank you very much. We are now taking a last question from Francien Intema from NOS. Francien.
Hi, I was wondering, video. I was wondering, you just said that with Janssen we have not seen this combination of thrombosis and low platelets. I was wondering how many people in the EU have been vaccinated with Janssen. Do we know this? And second question is, if I understood correctly, the review of the adolescents will finish at the end of the month. Is there an exact date for this already?
Thank you very much, Francien. For the first question about the vaccinations, Dr. Sweeney.
I believe from what Georgi has said that we haven't seen an incident of those yet in the European Union, but I'd actually have to ask Georgi for the number of people who have been vaccinated. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. The number of vaccinated people is available on the ECDC website, so that you can check there, maybe up-to-date information. I've taken notes. I think 2nd of May, we had 621,000 vaccinated with Janssen. So a limited number of people to draw any conclusions on cases of TTS, this thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome in Europe. The data that we've used for our evaluation by our safety committee was largely based on cases from US, where you know that this vaccine has been used in I think 7 or 8 million by now. So I think the other thing to acknowledge is that in terms of those reports, just for full transparency, it takes a little bit of time. So it might be at a later stage we would receive reports, hopefully not many, but at this stage we don't have any cases in Europe. We'll be closely monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the question on Comirnaty, Dr. Cavaleri?
Yeah, if I understood well, the question is about the time frame for the potential approval in adolescents 12 to 15 years of age. And indeed, as said at the beginning, we received last week the submission and all the data, and we are expediting this procedure, so hoping to finalize by the end of May, so that an approval will be there very soon.
Many thanks, Dr. Cavaleri, and many thanks to all our speakers, and many thanks for your interest and participation. As we said, this is for us a pilot. We are really testing this to see whether a regular briefing like this is useful for you, and therefore we are looking forward to your feedback. So thank you very much. And if you have any additional questions, as always, you can contact us under press@ema.europa.eu. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.